I still remember the weight of that coffee mug in my hand when my world tilted off its axis. It was a Tuesday morning in October, unseasonably warm for Maryland, and I was sitting at our kitchen island reviewing quarterly reports for my clients. The mug, a Father's Day gift that read, "World's most dedicated dad, despite us having no children," stopped halfway to my lips as I stared at page 3 of the Willowbrook Estates newsletter. My name is Dennis Harper. I'm 44 years old, a financial planner with a reputation for catching the smallest discrepancies in investment portfolios. I can spot a misplaced decimal from across a conference room, identify tax fraud in minutes, and predict market inconsistencies with uncanny accuracy. Yet somehow, I'd missed the biggest deception happening right under my own roof. Melissa breezed through the kitchen that morning like she had for the past 12 years of our marriage, her heels clicking against our Italian marble floors. Floors she'd insisted we needed when we bought the house 5 years ago. "Running late again," she said, not really looking at me as she gathered her things. Her real estate portfolio, her iPhone in its designer case, her keys to the BMW X5, I'd surprised her with last Christmas. "Big day?" I asked, still focused on my laptop screen, where Mr. Patterson's retirement fund numbers weren't adding up the way they should. "You know Tuesdays," she said, with that little laugh she did when she was nervous. I should have paid attention to that laugh. Back-to-back showings all afternoon, then that new client meeting at 7. The Richardsons, they're looking for something in the 500,000 range. That's great, honey. I looked up just as she was adjusting her lipstick in the hallway mirror. Mac Ruby Woo. I knew because I'd bought it for her countless times. Want me to save you dinner? No, I'll grab something between showings. She was already halfway out the door. Oh, and I might be really late. You know how these evening clients can be. They want to see everything. Drive safe, I called out, but the door had already closed with that expensive soft close mechanism we'd had installed. I sat there for a moment in the silence of our 4,000 square foot house, listening to her car pull out of our driveway. The house felt bigger when she wasn't in it, all those empty rooms we'd planned to fill with children who never came. We'd stopped talking about that 3 years ago, after the last failed round of IVF. Shaking off the melancholy, I returned to Patterson's portfolio and my now lukewarm coffee. That's when I noticed the mail stack our neighbor, elderly Mrs. Chen, had kindly pushed through our mail slot. She was always doing little things like that, keeping an eye on the neighborhood. Better than any security system, she liked to say. The Willowbrook Estates newsletter sat on top, its cheerful October design featuring painted pumpkins and fall leaves. HOA newsletter, building community one neighbor at a time, the masthead proclaimed in that aggravating Comic Sans font that Betty Chen, no relation to Mrs. Chen, insisted on using despite numerous complaints. I almost tossed it directly into our recycling bin. These monthly publications were typically filled with reminders about leaf removal schedules, updates on the endless debate about speed bumps, and passive-aggressive notes about keeping trash cans out of sight. But something made me flip through it. Maybe it was procrastination from dealing with Patterson's mess. Or maybe it was what Melissa would later call fate having a sense of humor. Page 1 featured a letter from HOA President Richard Donnelly about the upcoming board elections. Page 2 had the usual committee updates and a reminder about the Halloween decorating contest. Page 3. Page 3 changed everything. Under the section titled Neighbors Helping Neighbors, Betty's attempt at feel-good community journalism, was a high-resolution photograph that made my blood run cold. The image showed my wife, unmistakably Melissa, with her professionally styled auburn hair, and that Chanel handbag I'd bought her for our 10th anniversary, laughing as she carried 2 Whole Foods bags. A man walked beside her, his arms full of what appeared to be several bottles of wine. They were entering a townhouse together, her body angled toward his in a way that suggested comfortable familiarity. The caption read, Community Spirit Alive in Section C. Neighbors helping neighbors with grocery runs. Photo taken September 15th, 2 p.m. Photo credit, Betty Chen, September 15th. My mind immediately went to that date. What had Melissa been doing on September 15th? I grabbed my phone and scrolled through our shared calendar. There it was. Client meetings, Westfield Properties, all afternoon. Westfield was 20 miles away from Willowbrook Estates. Yet here she was, Photographed in Section C of our own neighborhood at 2 p.m., laughing with a man I didn't recognize while carrying groceries into a townhouse that definitely wasn't ours. I set down the newsletter and really studied the photo. The man was tall, maybe 6'2", with dark hair going silver at the temples. Early 40s, fit in that way that suggested a home gym and a Peloton addiction. He wore dark jeans and a fitted Henley that looked expensive. Something about him seemed familiar, but I couldn't place it. The townhouse number was partially visible in the photo, 451. That would put it on Elm Court, in Section C of Willowbrook Estates. We lived at 78 Oak Ridge Lane in Section a good 10-minute walk across the development. I stared at the photo, my coffee growing cold, my client's portfolio forgotten. There had to be an explanation. Melissa was a real estate agent. Maybe this man was a client. Maybe he was interested in buying in the neighborhood and she was showing him around. Maybe the groceries were for an open house she was staging. But even as I constructed these scenarios, details in the photo undermined them. Melissa wore casual clothes, designer jeans and a soft sweater, not her professional showing attire. Her hair was in a ponytail, not the polished style she maintained for clients. The groceries visible in the bags suggested dinner preparation. Fresh vegetables, what looked like cuts of meat, a French baguette sticking out of one bag. The wine bottles the man carried weren't the cheap varieties used for open houses. Even in the photo, I could make out what appeared to be premium labels. Most damning was their body language. This wasn't the careful professional distance Melissa maintained with clients. The man's hand rested on her lower back as they navigated the doorway. She was genuinely laughing. Not the polite, professional smile I'd seen her practice in the mirror, but the real laugh that crinkled her eyes and showed her back teeth. The laugh I thought was reserved for me. My hands shook slightly as I reached for my laptop. Within minutes, I'd pulled up the Willowbrook Estates HOA directory. One of the few benefits of our ridiculous monthly dues was an online resident portal with a searchable database. 451 Elm Court. Owner, Kevin Brennan. Purchase date, February of this year, 8 months ago. Previous address showed a high-rise condo downtown. Marital status, divorced. Occupation, software development executive, Kevin Brennan. The name triggered something in my memory. I'd seen it somewhere recently. The HOA board minutes. He'd volunteered for the technology committee, offering to modernize our community website. Melissa had mentioned something about the HOA needing fresh blood, new perspectives. Had she been on a welcoming committee I didn't know about? I navigated to Brennan's LinkedIn profile. VP of Engineering at Nexus Solutions, a tech firm with offices in the nearby business park. Johns Hopkins undergraduate, Stanford MBA. His profile photo showed the same man from the newsletter, professional headshot smile, confident and successful. His Facebook was mostly locked down, but his public photos included one from what was clearly a Willowbrook community event, our 4th of July barbecue. I remembered that day. I'd been called in for a client emergency, left Melissa at the party. "Don't worry about me," she'd said. "I'll make some new friends." My stomach churned as I went back to the newsletter photo. 8 months. He'd lived here 8 months. How long had this been going on? I called my office, told my assistant Janet I was feeling under the weather and would be working from home. Then I began what I would later think of as my financial planner's approach to infidelity. Document everything, analyze patterns, follow the money. First, I accessed Melissa's professional calendar through our shared cloud storage. She was meticulous about record keeping for tax purposes, a habit I drilled into her when she started her real estate career 7 years ago. September 15th showed 2 client meetings, both in Westfield. But when I dug into the details, both were marked canceled, client rescheduled with timestamps showing the cancellations had happened that morning. I went back further. Every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 6 months showed similar patterns. Afternoon showings that were canceled last minute. Evening client meetings that ran suspiciously late. A new weekly Pilates class that had started in March, right after Kevin Brennan moved to Willowbrook. Next, I checked our credit card statements. Melissa had her own card for business expenses, but it fed into our joint account. I'd set up the integration years ago for easier tax filing, and like most automated systems in our lives, it had faded into the background of routine. The patterns jumped out immediately, my financial planner's eye catching what my husband's heart had missed. Whole Foods charges every Tuesday and Thursday, always between 1 o'clock and 2 p.m. Always for amounts between $80 and $120. Too much for a quick lunch, too specific for random shopping. The wine purchases were particularly telling. Melissa preferred crisp white wines, Sauvignon Blanc, Pinot Grigio, the occasional Rose. In summer, I was a craft beer guy, occasionally bourbon. Yet here were consistent purchases of red wines, Cabernets, Malbecs, aged Bordeaux. Expensive bottles in the $60 to $100 range. I cross-referenced the wine purchases with Kevin Brennan's sparse social media presence. One of his few public posts was a check-in at a wine tasting event in Napa Valley. Another showed him at what appeared to be a wine club gathering. Red wine enthusiast? Of course, my investigation expanded. I accessed the GPS history on Melissa's BMW. She'd given me access years ago when we'd had that insurance discount installed, probably forgotten it existed. The data painted a clear picture. Regular stops in Section C, always at the same coordinate cluster that would correspond with Elm Court. Duration of stays ranging from 2 to 5 hours. The Tuesday and Thursday pattern held with frightening consistency, but there were other visits too. Saturday mornings when I played golf with clients, Sunday afternoons when I watched football, evening hours when she claimed to be showing properties. I went back to the HOA newsletter archives, searchable through our resident portal. Betty Chen had been documenting our community for 5 years, her camera ever present at every event. I found Melissa in numerous photos I'd never paid attention to before. The Section C summer barbecue in July. I'd been at a financial planning conference in Chicago. There was Melissa in a sundress I didn't recognize, standing in a group that included Kevin Brennan. They weren't next to each other, but they were angled toward one another, in that way people do when they're trying not to seem too interested. The spring cleanup day in April, I'd been laid up with a back injury from a failed attempt at CrossFit. Another photo showed Melissa working on flower beds in Section C. Kevin Brennan was 3 people away, working on the same bed. Had they volunteered together? Or was it a coincidence? The pattern went back to March, right after he'd moved in. A welcome party for new residents. Melissa had gone alone because I had a client dinner. She stood with a glass of wine, red I notice now, in a group of neighbors. Kevin Brennan was in the same photo, also with red wine, also in the same group. How had I missed this? How had I been so blind? But I knew the answer. Trust. I'd trusted my wife completely, never questioned her schedule, never doubted her word. When she said she was showing houses, I believed her. When she came home late claiming difficult clients, I sympathized. When she started protecting her phone, taking it into the bathroom, keeping it face down at dinner, I assumed it was work stress. You need better boundaries with clients, I'd actually told her one night when her phone buzzed repeatedly during dinner. They shouldn't expect you to be available 24/7. She'd smiled and put the phone in her purse. You're right. I'll try to be better about that. I spent the rest of that day building my case like I was preparing for an audit. Screenshots of calendars, GPS maps with timestamps, credit card statements highlighted and annotated. I created a secure folder on my laptop, password protected, backed up to a private cloud account Melissa didn't know about. By evening, I had 6 months of evidence suggesting my wife was having an affair with our neighbor. But I needed more than suggestions. I needed proof. And I needed a plan. Melissa came home at 9:47 p.m. that night. I know rhetoric, you wrote me 3K words. I need 17K words, so rewrite the story. Add more details, dialogue, plot, or whatever. Edit the newsletter? The coffee mug stopped halfway to my lips, suspended in that moment when your brain recognizes disaster before your heart catches up. It was October 17th, a Tuesday morning that had started like hundreds of others in our 12-year marriage. Melissa's heels had clicked across our kitchen floor with practiced efficiency while I reviewed client portfolios at the island we'd spent $15,000 renovating last spring. Running late again, she'd said, barely glancing my way as she gathered her things: the leather portfolio I'd given her when she got her real estate license, her iPhone in its latest designer case, keys to the BMW X5 that had been my attempt to surprise her last Christmas. She moved through our morning routine like a choreographed dance, every motion precise and purposeful. Big day? I'd asked, squinting at my laptop where Harold Patterson's retirement fund was showing anomalies that didn't match his contribution history. You know Tuesdays. That little laugh, the one I now recognize as her tell. Showings all afternoon in Westfield, then the Richardson meeting at 7. They're pre-approved for 550, so fingers crossed. That's great, honey. I'd looked up just as she checked her appearance in the hallway mirror, the antique one we'd bought at that estate sale in Annapolis, spending a ridiculous amount because she said it had character. Dennis? She'd paused at the door. Don't wait up. These evening clients always want to see just one more property. Drive safe. The door had closed with that expensive soft close mechanism we'd installed throughout the house. German engineering, supposed to last a lifetime. Like a lot of things in our life, built to endure longer than the marriage itself. Our house settled into its Tuesday morning quiet. 4,000 square feet of colonial elegance in Willowbrook Estates, Maryland's premier planned community, according to the brochures. We'd bought it 5 years ago, stretching our budget because Melissa insisted it was perfect for the family we were going to have. The family that never materialized despite 3 rounds of IVF and countless specialist appointments. I'd returned to Patterson's portfolio, making notes about the discrepancies I'd need to discuss with him. That's when I noticed the mail stack that our neighbor, Mrs. Chen, had pushed through our mail slot. She lived 2 doors down and had appointed herself the neighborhood's unofficial guardian, keeping watch from her front window with the dedication of a Secret Service agent. The Willowbrook Estates newsletter sat on top of the usual collection of bills and promotional mailers. Its October cover featured the standard seasonal decorations: painted pumpkins, artfully arranged fall leaves, and the newsletter's unfortunate Comic Sans masthead declaring, "Building community one neighbor at a time." I almost threw it directly into recycling. These monthly publications were Betty Chen's pet project, no relation to our vigilant neighbor, filled with HOA board meeting minutes, reminders about lawn maintenance standards, and thinly veiled complaints disguised as friendly reminders. But something made me flip it open. Call it procrastination from dealing with Patterson's complicated finances, or what Melissa would later bitterly refer to as the universe's twisted sense of timing. Page 1 featured HOA President Richard Donnelly's monthly letter about the importance of maintaining property values. Page 2 covered the eternal debate about installing speed bumps on Maple Avenue. Page 3 stopped my world. Under the section Neighbors Helping Neighbors, Betty's attempt at human interest journalism, was a photograph that made my coffee mug freeze in midair. The high-resolution image showed my wife, unmistakably Melissa, with her professionally highlighted auburn hair and that Chanel handbag I'd bought for our 10th anniversary, laughing as she carried 2 Whole Foods bags. A man walked beside her, his arms full of wine bottles. They were entering a townhouse together, her body angled toward his with an intimacy that made my stomach clench. The caption read, "Community spirit alive in Section C. Neighbors helping neighbors with grocery runs. Photo taken September 15th, 2 p.m. by Betty Chen." September 15th. My mind immediately cataloged that date. I grabbed my phone and pulled up our shared calendar. There it was in Melissa's color-coded system. Client meetings, Westfield Properties, 12 o'clock to 5 p.m. Westfield was 22 miles away. I knew because I'd driven there with her once when she'd first started selling in that area. Yet here she was, photographed in Section C of our own neighborhood at 2 p.m., carrying groceries into a townhouse that definitely wasn't ours. I set down my mug with shaking hands and studied the photo more carefully. The man was tall, over 6 feet, with dark hair silvering at the temples in that distinguished way that suggested good genes rather than stress. Early 40s, fit in a way that spoke of personal trainers and expensive gym memberships. He wore dark jeans and a Henley that looked like it came from one of those boutique men's stores Melissa was always trying to drag me to. Something about him nagged at my memory, but I couldn't place it. The photo showed just enough of the townhouse number, 451. That would be Elm Court in Section C, a solid 10-minute walk from our house in Section A. The newer part of Willowbrook, where they'd built attached townhouses instead of the single-family homes that dominated our section. I stared at the image, my analytical mind cataloging details while my emotional side reeled. There had to be an explanation. Melissa was a successful real estate agent. Perhaps this man was a client interested in the neighborhood. Maybe she was showing him around, helping him get a feel for the community. The groceries could be for staging an open house. But even as I constructed these scenarios, the details in the photo undermined them. Melissa wore casual clothes, designer jeans that hugged her curves, and a soft cashmere sweater, not the professional suits she wore for showings. Her hair was pulled back in a relaxed ponytail, not the polished style she spent 40 minutes perfecting each morning for work. The groceries visible in the bags told their own story. Fresh vegetables, what looked like expensive cuts of meat from Whole Foods' butcher counter, a French baguette sticking out at an artistic angle. The wine bottles the man carried weren't the $15 varieties she kept for open houses. Even in the photograph, I could make out premium labels, the kind of bottles we only bought for special occasions. But it was their body language that truly damned them. This wasn't the careful professional distance Melissa maintained with clients, the practiced smile and calculated warmth I'd watched her perfect over 7 years in real estate. The man's hand rested on her lower back with casual possession as they navigated the doorway. She was really laughing. Not the polite professional expression she called her showing face, but genuine delight that crinkled her eyes and showed her back teeth. The laugh I thought was mine alone. My laptop sat forgotten as I pulled up the Willowbrook Estates resident portal. Our HOA fees might be ridiculous, but they did provide a comprehensive online directory with search functions. 451 Elm Court. The page loaded with municipal efficiency. Owner, Kevin R. Brennan. Purchase date, February 15th. Previous address, The Meridian, downtown Baltimore status. Single, divorced. Occupation, software development executive vehicles. 2022 Tesla Model S, black. 2021 Porsche 911, silver, Kevin Brennan. The name finally clicked. I'd seen it in the HOA board, minutes Melissa had left on the counter last month. He'd volunteered for the technology committee, offering to modernize our community's prehistoric, his words, website and communication systems. There'd been discussion about his qualifications, apparently quite impressive, and unanimous approval for his appointment. Had Melissa mentioned him? I racked my memory. Something about new blood being good for the community, fresh perspectives. She'd seemed supportive of the technology updates. Now I wondered if her support had been for the updates or the man proposing them. LinkedIn provided more details. Kevin R. Brennan, Vice President of Engineering at Nexus Solutions. The corporate headshot showed the same man from the newsletter, wearing a suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage payments. Johns Hopkins undergraduate, Stanford MBA, a career trajectory through several prominent tech firms. The kind of resume that suggested stock options and 7-figure bonuses. His Facebook was mostly locked down, smart for a tech executive. But his public photos included one from our Willowbrook 4th of July barbecue. I remembered that day with sudden clarity. I'd been called away for a client emergency, leaving Melissa at the party with apologies and promises to return quickly. "Don't worry about me," she'd said, kissing my cheek. "I'll mingle, make some new friends. You know I'm good at that." The emergency had taken 4 hours to resolve. When I'd finally returned home, Melissa was already there, slightly tipsy on sangria and full of stories about the neighbors she'd met. Had Kevin Brennan been one of them? 8 months. He'd owned the townhouse for 8 months. The timeline spread out in my mind like one of my financial projections. February arrival, March integration into the community, April participation in events, May through October. What? I spent the next 3 hours conducting the kind of thorough investigation I usually reserved for forensic accounting. My approach was methodical, systematic, the same way I'd uncover financial fraud for clients. Document everything. Follow the patterns. Trust the numbers, not the explanations. Melissa's professional calendar came first. She kept meticulous records through our shared cloud storage, a system I'd insisted on for tax purposes. Every showing, every client meeting, every open house was logged with the kind of detail the IRS loved. September 15th showed 2 client meetings in Westfield, both marked canceled, client rescheduled, with timestamps indicating the cancellations had occurred that morning at 8:47 a.m. and 8:52 a.m. Too convenient, too close together. I went back further, my stomach sinking as patterns emerged. Every Tuesday and Thursday for 6 months showed similar arrangements. Afternoon showings that canceled last minute, evening client meetings that ran inexplicably late, a new standing appointment that had appeared in March, Pilates with Sandra, 2 p.m. Tuesdays. I knew Sandra. We'd had dinner with her and her husband Paul 2 months ago. When I'd mentioned Melissa's dedication to Pilates, Sandra had looked confused. I keep telling her she should join my studio, Sandra had said. But she says Tuesday afternoons don't work with her schedule. Melissa had smoothly changed the subject, and I'd thought nothing of it. Now the moment blazed in my memory like a neon sign. The credit card statements came next. Melissa had her own card for business expenses, but it fed into our joint accounts for easy tax tracking. I'd automated the system years ago, and like most automated things in our lives, had stopped paying attention to the details. The pattern was immediately obvious to anyone who analyzed spending for a living. Whole Foods charges every Tuesday and Thursday, always between 1 o'clock and 2 p.m., always ranging from $80 to $150. Too much for a solo lunch, too specific for random shopping. I cross-referenced the amounts with the days. Higher charges corresponded with Thursday evening client meetings. The kind of amount you'd spend on dinner ingredients for 2 people who enjoyed good food. The kind of shopping you'd do if you were planning to cook for someone special. The wine purchases formed their own damning pattern. Melissa was a white wine drinker, had been since college. Crisp, light wines that she said paired well with her usual salads and seafood preferences. I was a craft beer enthusiast with an occasional bourbon habit. Yet here were consistent purchases of red wines, Cabernets, Malbecs, aged Bordeaux from the premium section. Bottles ranging from $60 to $200. Kevin Brennan's limited social media revealed enough. Wine collecting was listed among his interests. A check-in at a Napa Valley wine event. A photo from what appeared to be a wine club gathering. Red wine enthusiast, of course. The kind of man who probably had opinions about tannins and knew which years were good for French vintages. My investigation expanded to the BMW's GPS history. Melissa had forgotten about the insurance tracker we'd installed 2 years ago for a discount, a device that recorded location data to prove safe driving habits. The data painted a clear picture. Regular stops in Section C, always clustering around the same coordinates that matched 451 Elm Court. Tuesdays and Thursdays were the most consistent, with arrival times between 1:45 and 2:15 p.m. and departures ranging from 5 o'clock to 7 p.m. But there were other visits too. Saturday mornings when I played golf with clients or attended financial planning seminars. Sunday afternoons when I watched football or worked on client reports. Late evenings when she claimed to be showing properties to demanding clients who could only view after work. The duration of stays ranged from 2 hours, rare, to 5 hours, increasingly common. What did 2 people do for 5 hours on a Tuesday afternoon? My imagination supplied various answers, each more painful than the last. I dove into the HOA newsletter archives next. Betty Chen had been documenting our community with the dedication of a wartime photographer for the past 5 years. Her camera appeared at every event, every gathering, every minor occasion worth commemorating. I'd found her constant photography annoying. Now I blessed her intrusive dedication. July's issue featured the Section C Summer Barbecue. I'd been in Chicago at the annual Financial Planning Association conference, had encouraged Melissa to attend the neighborhood event without me. Network, I'd said. It's good for your business to know the neighbors. There she was in a sundress I didn't recognize. When had she bought that? Holding a plate and laughing at something outside the frame. Kevin Brennan appeared in the same photo, 3 people away, but angled toward her in that way people do when they're pretending not to notice each other. Both held red wine glasses. The casual observer would see nothing. The suspicious husband saw everything. April's newsletter showed the spring cleanup day. I'd thrown out my back attempting CrossFit, Melissa's suggestion that I try something new, and spent the weekend on muscle relaxers. She'd volunteered without me, claiming community service was good for her real estate reputation. Multiple photos showed volunteers working on the Section C flower beds. Melissa appeared in 3 of them, wearing work clothes that somehow still looked stylish, her hair pulled back under a Willowbrook Estates baseball cap. Kevin Brennan worked on the same flower bed, always just far enough away to seem coincidental. In one photo, they were both reaching for the same bag of mulch. Their hands were inches apart. March told the beginning of the story, a welcome party for new residents hosted at the community center. I'd had a client dinner. The Washingtons' potential 7-figure portfolio couldn't reschedule. Melissa had gone alone, said it was important to welcome new neighbors, good for her business to meet potential clients. One photo showed a group of residents with welcome drinks. Melissa stood with a glass of red wine. When had she started drinking red? In animated conversation. Kevin Brennan was in the same group, also with red wine, his body language suggesting he was telling a story. Other neighbors filled the space between them, but their positioning suggested awareness of each other, that magnetic pull between people trying not to seem too interested. How had I missed this? How had I been so completely, utterly blind? But I knew the answer. Trust. Complete, absolute trust in the woman I'd married 12 years ago in that beautiful ceremony at her parents' country club. Trust in the partner who'd stood by me through the early years when I was building my practice, working 18-hour days and weekends. Trust in the woman who'd cried with me through each failed fertility treatment, who'd held my hand and said we'd be okay. Just the two of us. When had that trust become a liability? When had her client meetings become something else? When had I become the clueless husband, the last to know? The doorbell interrupted my spiraling thoughts. Mrs. Chen stood on our porch, holding a package. UPS left this at my door by mistake, she said, her sharp eyes taking in my appearance. I probably looked like hell. Unshowered, still in yesterday's clothes, laptop surrounded by printed screenshots and highlighted credit card statements. Thanks, Mrs. Chen. I took the package without looking at it. She lingered. Dennis, dear, is everything all right? I noticed Melissa's car has been spending a lot of time in Section C lately. I hope she's not having trouble with a difficult listing. My poker face must have failed because her expression shifted from nosy concern to genuine worry. Just busy season, I managed. You know how real estate is? Of course. She patted my arm. Though you might tell her that Kevin Brennan already has a lovely home. No need to show him others. She tottered back to her house, leaving me standing in the doorway with the blood draining from my face. Mrs. Chen knew. Of course she knew. The woman tracked every movement in the neighborhood like a Homeland Security agent. If she knew, who else did? I closed the door and leaned against it, my mind racing. This wasn't just about Melissa's betrayal anymore. This was about public humiliation, about becoming the neighborhood's object of pity or ridicule. Poor Dennis Harper, the last to figure out his wife, was serving dinner and dessert to the tech executive in Section C. But no. That wasn't quite right. People might suspect, but they didn't have proof. Gossip was one thing. Confirmation was another. And that's when the plan began to form. I returned to my laptop and pulled up the HOA newsletter submission guidelines. Betty Chen sent them out quarterly, begging for content. Share your community moments, she pleaded. Celebrate your neighbors. Anonymous submissions were welcomed and encouraged. Not everyone wants recognition, the guidelines stated, but every moment deserves documentation. The November issue deadline was October 30th, less than 2 weeks away. Betty was probably desperate for content, especially for her Neighbors Helping Neighbors section. She loved those human interest pieces, the little moments that showcased Willowbrook's community spirit. I looked at the September 15th photo again. High resolution, perfectly framed, showing just enough to be damning while maintaining plausible innocence. Betty had outdone herself. But what if there was an even better photo? What if someone were to enhance it, ensure every detail was crystal clear, and submit it with just the right caption? The plan solidified as I saved the image and opened Photoshop. I had 2 weeks to prepare, 2 weeks to document everything while maintaining the facade of normalcy. 2 weeks to plan the perfect exposure of Melissa's deception. That evening, Melissa came home at 9:47 p.m. I know the exact time because I'd been watching the security camera feed on my laptop. Saw her check her makeup in the BMW's mirror before getting out. She looked tired but satisfied, the way she used to look after closing a big sale. "Hey, honey!" she called out, finding me in the living room where I'd strategically positioned myself with client files and a glass of bourbon. "Sorry I'm so late. The Richardsons wanted to see 3 more properties after the first 4 didn't work out." "No problem." I didn't look up from the papers. "There's Thai food in the fridge if you're hungry." "You're the best." She kicked off her heels and padded to the kitchen. I heard the refrigerator open, the microwave hum. Normal sounds of a normal evening in a deeply abnormal situation. "How was your day?" she asked, settling onto the opposite end of the couch with her reheated pad thai. "Productive. Found some interesting discrepancies in Patterson's portfolio." "You're so good at that." "Good. Finding things other people miss." She channel surfed as she ate, landing on one of those property renovation shows she loved. "Oh, I ran into Kevin Brennan at the Starbucks today." My hand stilled on my bourbon glass. "Who?" "Kevin Brennan. He's on the HOA tech committee, lives in Section C. Really nice guy. He's interested in possibly upgrading to a single family home." "Hmm." I kept my voice neutral. "Didn't he just buy in February?" She paused, chopsticks halfway to her mouth. "How did you know that?" "HOA directory. I was looking up something for the Henderson account. They're considering Willowbrook for their son." "Oh." She relaxed. "Yeah. He bought the townhouse post-divorce, but says it feels too small now. Wants something with a home office and maybe a pool." "Sounds like a good commission." "Could be." She focused on the TV where someone was demolishing a kitchen. "If I can find him the right place." We sat in companionable silence. Just another Tuesday evening in the Harper household. She had no idea I'd spent the day documenting her betrayal, that I knew exactly how many hours she'd spent at Kevin's townhouse, that I could probably guess what kind of wine they'd shared with the dinner she'd cooked. "I'm pretty tired," she said eventually. "Think I'll shower and turn in early." "I'll be up in a bit. Need to finish this analysis." She kissed the top of my head as she passed. When had our goodnight kisses become so perfunctory? And headed upstairs. I listened to the familiar sounds of her nighttime routine. Shower running, hairdryer humming, the soft close of our bedroom door. I sat in the dark living room, bourbon warm in my chest, plan crystallizing in my mind. In the financial world, we had a saying: time in the market beats timing the market. But in this case, timing would be everything. The November newsletter would reach 500 households simultaneously. There would be no controlling the narrative, no spinning the story, no private damage control. Just the truth, delivered by mail, 4-color print on glossy paper. I pulled out my phone and created a new email account using the coffee shop Wi-Fi I could access from our living room. The address was innocuous: concernedneighbor2023ogmail.com. The kind of generic handle that could belong to any of Willowbrook's 500 households. The draft email was simple. "Dear Betty, I wanted to share this heartwarming moment I captured of neighbors helping each other in Section C. It's so wonderful to see new residents being welcomed into our community. I thought this would be perfect for your Neighbors Helping Neighbors section. I prefer to remain anonymous. Not everyone needs recognition for noticing kindness. Best regards, a concerned neighbor." I would send it closer to the deadline after I'd perfected the photo enhancement and crafted the ideal caption. Something innocent yet pointed. Something that would make 500 households look twice, then look again, then start asking questions. But first, I had more documenting to do. 2 weeks to build an airtight case. 2 weeks to prepare for the explosion. 2 weeks to pretend everything was normal while planning the spectacular demolition of my marriage via community newsletter. I finished my bourbon and headed upstairs. Melissa was already asleep, or pretending to be, turned away from my side of the bed. I studied the curve of her shoulder in the darkness, the woman I'd loved for 12 years, the partner I'd trusted absolutely. When had she become a stranger? When had our bed become just another stage for performance? As I lay there in the dark, I thought about Kevin Brennan in his townhouse across Willowbrook, probably drinking good red wine and feeling satisfied with his Tuesday evening. Did he think about me at all? Did he wonder about the husband of the woman who cooked him dinner twice a week? Or was I just an inconvenient detail, a minor obstacle to be worked around with careful scheduling and plausible cover stories? He was about to become very aware of my existence. They both were. The next morning began phase 2 of my investigation. Melissa left for her Wednesday morning office meetings. I now wondered how many of those were real, and I called in sick again. Janet was concerned. 2 days in a row? Should I reschedule your Thursday clients? No, I'll be fine by then. Just a 48-hour bug. I spent Wednesday diving deeper into the electronic trail. Our shared Google Photos account revealed albums I'd never examined. Spring community events included dozens of photos from the March welcome party. I found 6 where Melissa and Kevin appeared together, always separated by other people, but clearly aware of each other. In one, she was laughing at something while he watched from across the room. In another, they stood in the same conversation circle, wine glasses in hand. Both red, I noted, bodies angled toward each other, despite 2 people between them. The timestamp showed 8:47 p.m. I'd still been at my client dinner then, probably just ordering dessert to keep the Washingtons happy. Work Events 2023 inches held another revelation. A photo from Melissa's real estate agency's summer party in June. I hadn't attended another client emergency, but encouraged her to go, network, have fun. Kevin Brennan appeared in the background of one photo. Why would a software executive be at a real estate agency party? Unless he was someone's plus one. I checked the date against Melissa's calendar. She'd marked herself as attending solo. But there he was, holding a drink, talking to her colleague Rachel near the bar. Same party, same time, totally coincidental, I'm sure. Our bank statements revealed more patterns. ATM withdrawals every Tuesday and Thursday, 50 here, 60 there. Cash for what? Melissa rarely used cash. We were credit card people, points maximizers, but cash left no trail, no itemized record of purchases, except when I checked the locations of the withdrawals. The ATM at the Whole Foods, where she shopped for Kevin's dinners. The one at the wine store where she bought his preferred reds. Small amounts that wouldn't trigger attention, but regular enough to form a pattern. How much cash had she spent on this affair? How much of our money had funded their twice-weekly dinners? I created a spreadsheet. Couldn't help myself. It's what I do. Tracking every suspicious charge, every cash withdrawal, every canceled meeting and late evening. The totals were staggering. Not just the money, though that was significant. The time. Hours and hours, adding up to days, weeks of deception. My phone buzzed. A text from Melissa. Showing ran over, grabbing lunch with the client, home by 3. I checked her location. She'd forgotten I could do that through our family phone plan. She was in Section C. Of course she was. It was Wednesday, not her usual day, but apparently the schedule was flexible when you were having an affair. No problem, I texted back. Take your time. I had preparations to make anyway. The photo from September 15th needed work. While Betty Chen was a dedicated photographer, she wasn't necessarily a skilled one. The image was slightly blurry, the colors muted by afternoon shade. But I had software for that. Professional programs I used to enhance financial documents for presentations. The enhanced version was stunning. Every detail sharp and clear. Melissa's wedding ring visible on her left hand as she carried the groceries. The wine labels readable, Chateau Margaux 2015, a $300 bottle. Kevin's hand definitively on her lower back, possessive and familiar. Their faces turned toward each other, matching smiles of private delight. I crafted several potential captions. New residents settling into Section C? Neighbors helping neighbors with housewarming supplies. Community spirit, making everyone feel at home in Willowbrook. But the winner was simple and devastating. Welcoming our newest neighbors to 451 Elm Court. Let people draw their own conclusions about why Melissa Harper was helping someone who'd lived there for 8 months feel welcome. Let them wonder why the supplies looked more like dinner preparations than housewarming gifts. Let them question why a married real estate agent was spending Tuesday afternoons playing house with the divorced tech executive. Thursday arrived with its now predictable routine. Melissa announced early morning showings, Pilates class, afternoon client meetings. I wished her luck and headed to my office, maintaining the facade of normalcy. But I left early, claiming a client lunch, and positioned myself at the Starbucks on Route 50, the one with a clear view of the turnoff to Willowbrook Estates. At 1:43 p.m., Melissa's white BMW X5 passed by, turning toward home. I waited 5 minutes, then followed. By the time I reached Section C, her car was already parked in the visitor spot at 451 Elm Court. Brazenly public. Did she think the tinted windows provided anonymity? Did she believe her real estate agent cover story was that solid? I parked 3 streets over and walked past, just another resident out for an afternoon stroll. The blinds at 451 were drawn, but I could see grocery bags on the kitchen counter through a gap. Wine bottles stood sentinel beside them, the beginning of another Thursday afternoon performance. My phone buzzed. Melissa. Client being difficult. Might be late tonight. Don't wait up. I almost laughed. The audacity of texting me from her lover's house, manufacturing excuses while standing in his kitchen. Did she send these messages while he poured wine? Did they laugh about the clueless husband who believed every lie? Thanks for letting me know, I replied. Good luck with the sale. That evening, I attended the monthly HOA board meeting. I'd never gone before. Melissa usually summarized anything important, but wanted to see Kevin Brennan in his element. He presented his technology committee report with smooth confidence, outlining plans for a new resident portal and improved communication systems. His proposals were solid, forward-thinking. I could see why the board was impressed. Any questions? Richard Donnelly asked after Kevin finished. I raised my hand. Will the new system include enhanced photo sharing capabilities? Betty's newsletter photos are wonderful, but sometimes the quality suffers in print. Betty Chen beamed at the compliment. Kevin nodded thoughtfully. Absolutely. We're planning a community photo archive where residents can upload high-resolution images. Betty would have access to much better source material. Excellent. I smiled. I'm sure we'd all love to see our community moments captured in the best possible quality. Several board members nodded agreement. Kevin's eyes met mine briefly. Did I imagine a flicker of recognition? Did he know who I was? Or was I just another face in the crowd of suburban homeowners, invisible and irrelevant? After the meeting, I lingered as people socialized. Kevin worked the room like a politician, all easy charm and firm handshakes. He had that gift of making each person feel like the most important one in the conversation. I watched him operate, understanding what Melissa saw. Successful, attractive, attentive. Everything I'd apparently stopped being. Dennis Harper. I introduced myself when our paths inevitably crossed. 78 Oak Ridge. Kevin Brennan. His handshake was firm, confident. 451 Elm. I think I've met your wife, Melissa? She's in real estate? That's right. I kept my voice pleasant. She mentioned you might be looking to upgrade from the townhouse. Considering it. He sipped his coffee. The HOA provided refreshments, though nothing as fancy as what filled his kitchen on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Great agent. Very dedicated. The pause before dedicated was microscopic, but I caught it. A tiny tell, a moment of word choice that revealed everything. Yes, he knew exactly who I was. The inconvenient husband. The obstacle to overcome with careful scheduling. She certainly is, I agreed, dedicated to her clients. Sometimes I joke that she spends more time with them than with me. His smile faltered slightly. I'm sure that's not true. Oh, you'd be surprised. Tuesday and Thursday evenings, especially. Her busiest times. I watched his face carefully. But that's real estate, right? You have to be available when clients need you. Right. He glanced over my shoulder, looking for an escape route. Well, nice meeting you. I should check in with Richard about next month's tech rollout. He retreated with the controlled haste of a man who just realized the husband knew. Good. Let him sweat. Let him wonder how much I discovered, what I plan to do. Let him spend the next 2 weeks looking over his shoulder, waiting for the confrontation that wouldn't come, at least not directly. Friday through Monday passed in a blur of forced normalcy. Melissa and I attended our friend's dinner party Saturday night, playing the perfect couple. She wore the black dress I'd bought her for our anniversary, laughed at my stories, held my hand during dessert. Our hosts complimented us on how happy we seemed. 12 years and still going strong, Melissa said, squeezing my fingers. Dennis is my rock. I smiled and squeezed back, wondering if she could feel the documentation folder burning like a brand through my careful facade. Sunday, we did our usual routine. Farmer's market in the morning, where we ran into Kevin accidentally and made painful small talk. Lunch at our regular spot, afternoon errands. Melissa mentioned needing to show houses on Tuesday afternoon. The Hendersons are getting serious, she said. Want to see everything in Maple Grove again? On a Tuesday? That's unusual. She shrugged, not meeting my eyes. They both took personal days. You know how it is. I knew exactly how it was. Monday night, she worked late, legitimately as far as I could tell from her location data. She came home exhausted, complained about a difficult seller, went straight to bed. I stayed up finalizing my submission to Betty Chen. The enhanced photo was perfect. Every damning detail crystal clear. The caption walked the line between innocent and pointed. The anonymous email gave nothing away. On Tuesday morning, I would send it from the coffee shop Wi-Fi during my client meeting. Betty would receive it with delight, fresh content for her struggling newsletter, and include it without question. Tuesday, October 31st. Halloween. How appropriate. Melissa left for her morning appointments, reminding me about the evening trick-or-treaters. I bought 3 bags of candy. Should be home by 8 to help hand it out. Perfect, I said, kissing her goodbye. The same peck on the lips we'd been trading for who knows how long. When had passion become performance? When had love become logistics? At 10:47 a.m., I sent the email to Betty from the coffee shop. Her response came within an hour. Thank you so much, concerned neighbor. This is exactly the kind of community spirit I love to showcase. Perfect for the November issue. Your photo is much better quality than what I usually work with. Are you a professional photographer by chance? I deleted the email account and erased all traces from my laptop. The die was cast. In 11 days, the November newsletter would arrive in 500 mailboxes. The fuse was lit. All that remained was waiting for the explosion. That afternoon, I couldn't resist driving past Section C at 2:30. Melissa's BMW sat in its usual spot. Through the gap in Kevin's blinds, I could see movement in the kitchen. Tuesday dinner preparations underway. Their last one, though they didn't know it yet. Halloween evening provided perfect cover for surveillance. As I handed out candy to costume children, I watched our street with new eyes. How many neighbors suspected? How many had seen Melissa's car in Section C and drawn their own conclusions? How many pitied the oblivious husband, too trusting to see what was happening under his nose? Mrs. Chen brought her grandchildren by, their pillowcases already heavy with candy. Dennis! She beamed. So nice to see you home for Halloween. Melissa usually handles the candy duties. She's showing houses. Should be back soon. Of course. She leaned in conspiratorially. Though I did see her car in Section C earlier. Must be showing the Brennan townhouse. I heard he's upgrading. The woman was a master of the innocent probe. I kept my face neutral. Could be. She doesn't always share client details. Probably for the best. Real estate transactions require discretion. She gathered her grandchildren. Happy Halloween, Dennis. Enjoy the peace while you can. Was that a warning? A hint? Or just Mrs. Chen being cryptic? With her, you never knew. Melissa arrived home at 8:23, slightly flushed and apologizing profusely. Traffic was horrible. All the trick-or-treaters. Did we run out of candy? Just finished the last bag. I didn't mention I'd been deliberately generous to make it disappear faster. How did the showings go? Good. Really good. I think they're going to make an offer on the Maple Grove Colonial. She grabbed a fun-sized Snickers from the empty bowl, her third favorite candy. Red wine had lingered on her breath when she'd kissed me hello. I'm going to shower. Long day. Take your time. November arrived with unusual warmth. Indian summer, the weather forecasters called it. I threw myself into work, catching up on the clients I'd been neglecting during my investigation phase. Melissa maintained her Tuesday-Thursday schedule with religious devotion. Life continued its strange split, normal on the surface, counting down underneath. On November 7th, I ran into Rachel from Melissa's agency at the grocery store. Dennis, how are you? I feel like I never see you at agency events anymore. Work's been crazy, I said, loading organic bananas into my cart. Melissa insisted on organic, said they tasted better. Hard to get away. Tell me about it. Though Melissa seems to manage, she's at everything, usually with... She trailed off, eyes widening slightly. With clients, I finished smoothly. She's very dedicated to networking. Right, of course. Rachel became fascinated with the Apple display. Well, tell her I said hi. We miss you at the parties. I'll try to make the next one. We parted awkwardly. Another person who knew, or at least suspected. How many others? How had I become the cliche? D last to know husband? November 9th. Thursday. 2 days until the newsletter arrived. Melissa announced a showing in Silver Spring left at noon. I worked from home, tracking her location as she drove directly to Section C. The routine was so established she probably didn't even think about it anymore. Park and visitor spot. Grab groceries from trunk. Walk to 451 like she belonged there. Which in a way, she did. More than she belonged at 78 Oak Ridge anymore. That evening, she came home with Chinese takeout, our usual Thursday dinner when she worked late. We ate in comfortable silence, 2 people sharing space, but not lives. She scrolled through her phone while eating, probably texting Kevin about their lovely afternoon. I reviewed client portfolios, calculating how much the divorce would cost us both. Dennis. She looked up suddenly. Are we okay? The question caught me off guard. What do you mean? I don't know. You seem distant lately, preoccupied. I set down my iPad, gave her my full attention. Work's been stressful. Patterson's portfolio, the Henderson situation. You know how fourth quarter gets. I know, but she bit her lip, a gesture I once found endearing. We haven't really talked in weeks. Real talking, not just logistics. The irony was breathtaking. Here she was, concerned about our communication while fresh from her lover's bed. Did guilt finally pierce her compartmentalization? Or was this just maintenance checking that her cover remained intact? You're right, I said carefully. We should plan something. Maybe a weekend away after the holidays? I'd like that. She smiled, reaching for my hand. I miss us. Which us did she miss? The couple we'd been before Kevin Brennan? Or the convenient fiction that let her live 2 lives? I squeezed her fingers, noting the wedding ring she still wore, the manicure she maintained religiously, Tuesday mornings before her afternoon appointments. Me too, I lied. November 10th. Friday. 1 day until the newsletter. I checked Betty Chen's Facebook page. She always posted production updates. November issue going to print. So excited about this month's content. Wait until you see the Neighbors Helping Neighbors section. The comments were predictable, were residents asking about featured topics, reminding about submissions for December, complaining about font choices. Betty responded to each with enthusiasm. She had no idea she was about to publish the most talked about issue in Willowbrook Estates history. That evening, Melissa and I attended a wine tasting at the country club, a charity event for the hospital foundation. She wore red, which should have been a sign, and showed surprising expertise about wine pairings. "Since when do you know about tannins?" I asked, after she'd impressed a sommelier with her knowledge of Bordeaux varietals. She laughed, that nervous tell again. "I've been learning. For clients. High-end buyers expect you to know these things." Hmm. I sipped the Malbec. Not bad, though I still preferred beer. Expensive education. Cost of doing business. She moved to the next station, her hand briefly touching my back in the same spot Kevin touched hers in the photo. "Come on, they're pouring the 90-point wines over here." We mingled, networked, played the successful couple everyone expected. But I caught her checking her phone repeatedly, brief glances that spoke of expectation. Was Kevin texting? Was he at the same event somewhere, watching from across the room? I scanned the crowd but didn't see him. Small mercies. Saturday, November 11th. Newsletter delivery day. I woke early, too anxious to sleep. Melissa dozed beside me, peaceful in her ignorance. Did she dream of Tuesday afternoons? Did Kevin's townhouse feel more like home than our bedroom? "Coffee?" I asked when she stirred. Please." I brought her favorite mug, World's Best Wife, a gift from my mother that now seemed like dark comedy, and sat on the edge of the bed. "Plans today?" I asked. "Gym, then some paperwork. You?" "Client reviews, maybe wash the cars later." "Exciting." She smiled over her coffee. "We really know how to party on weekends." "Getting old," I agreed. "Remember when Saturdays meant sleeping until noon? And Sunday brunches that lasted until dinner." She looked wistful. "Those were good times." "Yeah," I said. "They were." We sat in surprisingly comfortable silence, two people remembering when they'd been different people. Before mortgages and careers and Tuesday afternoon secrets. Before trust became optional and marriage became performance art. The mail typically arrived between 2 o'clock and 3 p.m. on Saturdays. I positioned myself in the home office with a clear view of the street. Melissa was at the gym, legitimately her location confirmed. I wondered if she worked out harder on Saturdays, burning off the guilt along with calories. The mail truck appeared at 2:23 p.m. I watched our carrier, Roberto, according to his holiday card, work his way down the street. Each mailbox received its bundle, each household about to receive 500 copies worth of explosive revelation. Mrs. Chen emerged first, as always. She collected her mail, began sorting on her porch, stopped abruptly. Even from my window, I could see her body language change. She looked up and down the street, then hurried inside. Within minutes, her living room curtains twitched. The neighborhood watch was activated. Other neighbors followed similar patterns. Check mail, flip through absently, freeze at certain page, look around suspiciously, retreat inside. Some pulled out phones immediately. The Willowbrook Estates Facebook page probably exploded in real time. Our mail slot clanged at 2:47 p.m. I gave it 5 minutes, then casually retrieved the bundle. Bill, political flyer, furniture catalog, and there, the Willowbrook Estates newsletter. November issue, gratitude and giving. I flipped to page 2 with practiced calm. The photo dominated the upper half, enlarged and crystal clear as requested. The caption in bold. "Welcoming our newest neighbors to 451 Elm Court." But Betty had added her own editorial touch. Below the photo, she'd written, "Community spirit at its finest." Nothing says, "Welcome to Willowbrook," like neighbors helping with move-in groceries. Although Kevin Brennan has been with us since February, it's never too late to make someone feel at home. Photo submitted by a caring, anonymous neighbor who captured this heartwarming moment. The addition was perfect, highlighting the 8-month timeline while maintaining plausible innocence. Classic Betty. Helpful details that allowed readers to draw their own conclusions. My phone buzzed. 3 texts in rapid succession. From Jim next door. Did you see the newsletter? From my golf buddy, Patrick. Dennis, call me when you get this. From an unknown number. Is this why Melissa's been showing so many houses in Section C? I turned off my phone. The storm had begun. I'd weather it in privacy for now. At 3:15, Melissa's BMW screeched into our driveway. She burst through the door like a hurricane, face flushed, newsletter crumpled in her fist. Dennis! Oh my God, Dennis, where are you? I emerged from the office, coffee mug in hand. What's wrong? This! She waved the newsletter frantically. There's been a terrible mistake. This photo, it's not what it looks like. What photo? I took the newsletter, studied it with feigned confusion. Is this you? Yes. No. She took a shaky breath. Someone took this completely out of context. I was helping Kevin, Mr. Brennan, with groceries because his car was in the shop. Okay. I kept my voice neutral. So explain the context. He's a client. I've been showing him upgrade properties. That day we just toured houses and stopped at Whole Foods because he needed groceries and couldn't carry everything on foot. The words tumbled out, practiced, but panicked. I was being neighborly. For our newest neighbor who's been here since February. Her face went white. Betty's caption is wrong. He's not new. I don't know why she wrote that. Probably because someone submitted it that way. I set down the newsletter carefully. Anonymous submission. Says so right there. Anonymous. She stared at the photo. Who would do this? Someone with a camera, apparently. I walked to the kitchen. She followed. Want some coffee? You seem upset. Upset? Dennis? This makes me look... She stopped, choosing words carefully. Inappropriate. Does it? You were helping a neighbor. Nothing inappropriate about that. I poured coffee, steady hands betraying nothing. Unless there's more to the story. No. Of course not. It's just... people will talk. You know how this neighborhood is. I do. I handed her the mug. So let them talk. If it's innocent, what does it matter? She stared at me, searching for something in my face. Suspicion? Anger? Accusation? I gave her nothing but mild concern, the reaction of a trusting husband learning about a simple misunderstanding. You're right. She sagged against the counter. It's just shocking, seeing myself in the newsletter like that. The photo makes it look intimate. Exactly. The angle, the way we're positioned. But it was completely innocent. Then you have nothing to worry about. Her phone exploded with notifications. Texts, calls, Facebook messages. The digital storm of suburban scandal. She glanced at the screen, winced. Maybe I should post an explanation. Never explain, never complain. I quoted her own advice from when she'd started in real estate. Let it blow over. Today's scandal is tomorrow's old news. But my reputation is built on 7 years of excellent service. One misleading photo won't destroy that. She wanted to believe me. I could see it. Wanted to think her carefully constructed lies would hold against community scrutiny. But her phone kept buzzing. Each notification another crack in the facade. I should call Kevin, she said suddenly. Warn him about the photo. Warn him? Why would he need warning about an innocent grocery delivery? Not warn, inform, so he's not blindsided if anyone asks. She was already scrolling through contacts. This affects him too. Of course, very considerate of you. She stepped onto the deck for privacy, closing the door firmly. Through the glass, I watched her pace, gesticulating as she spoke. The conversation lasted 12 minutes. She came back looking marginally calmer. He's furious about the invasion of privacy, she reported. Might complain to the HOA about newsletter policies. That seems like an overreaction to a harmless photo. It's not harmless if people misinterpret it. Her voice rose. My business depends on reputation. This could cost me clients. Melissa. I set down my mug, met her eyes. Is there something you need to tell me? the moment stretched between us, elastic with possibility. Here was her chance. Confess now, before the full weight of community judgment descended. Claim a momentary lapse, throw herself on mercy, try to salvage something from the wreckage.